I'm Özgen.
And I'm Daniel, and welcome to Art Talks for Beginners.
If you're wondering whether a painting is by Van Eyck or Van Dyck,
then you're in the right place.
welcome.
Welcome.
Tell me what you see in this episode's painting.
Okay, so looking across the painting, I'm going to focus on the figures. I think there are 6 in total. 2 on the left, one is holding a branch of a tree, and the other one is on the floor holding the arm or the hand of the third figure in the center. This is a bit of a strange figure, this third one, because its legs are like a snake or something wrapped around the tree. Then there's a figure in red, the only clothed figure actually, with maybe like a stick or a sword perhaps pointing outside of the picture, or towards the neck of the 5th figure and the 6th figure who are moving away. Yes. My guess is that this is the fall from grace. Yes. The Garden of Eden, and I'm thinking that this is Adam and Eve twice, I think, in the painting.
Exactly.
Yeah. First of all, one moment, and then secondly on the right hand side when they're moving away.
This is fall of man, or what we call as original sin, and expulsion from heaven. This is the name of the painting as well. And as you have guessed right, the figures in the painting are Adam and Eve on the left, and also Adam and Eve again on the right, because that shows us 2 different stages of committing the sin and then being expelled from the consequences. So like the cause and effect. Yeah. Yes. This painting is a little bit easier than the others maybe, because the topic is very well known to many people. Yeah. And when you look at it, you might think that, oh, I know a lot about this painting. But there are a lot of symbols or things that we can read when we look more closely. Okay. Let's focus first on the tree in the middle. Okay. Do you know what this tree is called?
The tree of good and evil.
Yes, it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Right. It has the forbidden fruit.
Yes, and it has the forbidden fruit. God created Adam and Eve. He placed them in Garden of Eden. And in Garden of Eden, there's this tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it contains both good and evil in its structure. And man is forbidden to eat from this tree because humanity does not have any knowledge of evil then.
Living in utopia up until this point.
Yes, exactly. They're living in heaven, they're living in Garden of Eden. But when they do this, which is the forbidden fruit they reach and take and eat, then they get to be introduced to evil, which is not good. That is the main story here.
But they don't take it, they don't walk up to it and take it. There is the temptation.
Yes, exactly. What do you know about that?
I know that it was a serpent, like hissing towards Eve and tempting her to go and take the forbidden fruit. So I guess that's the figure in the center.
Yes. Devil takes the shape of a serpent, of a snake, and first tempts Eve to take the forbidden fruit from the tree, and then Eve makes Adam to eat the fruit as well, and commit the sin. Yeah.
So I guess here in the image we see Eve receiving the fruit, so taking the fruit from the serpent.
Yes.
Maybe, and Adam is holding on to the tree.
So he's also picking himself.
Looks like it, yeah.
Yes. That's something interesting that we should talk about a little bit later. Let's focus on the serpent first. Okay. How does the serpent look like?
Really odd. Like with the legs turning into like a serpent tail is really strange. It's very hard
coiled around the tree.
Yeah, exactly.
But the body is a human body.
Completely normally human.
Is it a man? Is it a woman?
I don't know. It looks like there's a breast there, so I guess it's a woman.
It looks more like a woman. Yeah. Why do you think the painter painted it as a woman, but not like a full snake?
Is the snake is the devil, right? Incarnate.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. Is the devil a woman? No, it's Lucifer.
That is kind of like this, because woman is the one who has committed the sin in the first place, and she even caused Adam to commit the sin as well. And the snake is the woman because she is the main source of the sin.
Right. I'm hearing misogynist tones in this. It sounds a little bit not very feminist.
Old Testament. Let's look at the figures though. As you have noticed, Eve is receiving the fruit from the snake. Yeah. And Adam seems like he's reaching out for the fruit himself.
Also, yeah.
Do you think the story is like this in the Old Testament?
I remember the story being, and like you mentioned, the serpent tempts Eve. Eve takes the fruit, tries it, and takes it to Adam afterwards. So I guess maybe this is...
So the painter maybe doesn't know. He didn't read the Bible.
Oh, maybe. Who didn't know that?
Actually, he did. He did, and he is a very religious painter. We will get to that. Okay. Let's keep this in mind that the painter didn't stick to the facts in the original story.
Okay, like a reimagining, maybe.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the tree as well. As you might have guessed, you see this tree of knowledge have which fruit normally? What do you see in paintings more?
Is it an apple?
Yeah, normally we see apples. It's always an apple tree with bright red apples, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
But in this version, it's a fig tree.
Yeah, the leaves.
And I'm not sure, but I believe the original is a fig tree as well.
Okay.
So that's why we don't see apples here. We don't see the fruit so clearly. Because apple is a little bit of an idealized form of this forbidden fruit as well. Because apple is a very common fruit. And also a bright red apple looks very tempting. It is a source of passion. It creates that feeling for us. That's why it's always the red apple. You see it in Snow White, for example, in the story as well. It's always red apple. That's why I believe it's represented more in the sense of
glinting temptation.
Yes.
The red apple on a hot summer's day.
We know that Adam and Eve were tempted, mostly Eve in the beginning, were tempted by the snake, by the devil, and they committed this sin. They did something that God didn't want them to. So they became the sinners.
Then there's a confrontation with God and he expels them from the garden.
Yes, exactly. What they did is called original sin. And in the second scene, we see how they are expelled from the Garden of Eden. How are they expelled? Let's just get into that.
Is that God? It can't be God expelling them. No. Maybe it's an angel.
Yeah, it's an angel.
I don't remember the exact expelling itself, but I guess this moment is when the angel has come down and said, "Get out."
Yes.
And I remember that.
And doing with.
Is it a sword?
Yeah, it's a sword. Okay. It's an unsheathed sword. It's like threatening them with a sword, kicking them out of the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, I remember that in the Garden of Eden before they had no shame. There was no sort of like body image or kind of shame about how you look. And then afterwards they suddenly become aware that they're naked.
Yes.
Right, and I see that here in Eve's posture particularly. She looks like she's trying to hide.
Yes.
So.
And in many paintings, it's because of the shame they discovered, you see that they are covering their genitals. Eve covers her breast and they cover their genitals. We see that. In this one, we don't see it. Again, the painter does something really interesting that hasn't been done before. So it's a bit different in this sense. And in general, when you compare the figures on the left and on the right, how does the figures on the left look? How do the figures on the right look?
On the left, they're much younger.
Yes.
And on the right, they look older.
Exactly. They look much younger, much more idealized, more beautiful, more energetic. They are more muscular and looking really healthy. And on the right, the figures look older. Their bodies are a little bit more deformed. Their faces, especially look closer, they are dark. They're in darkness. And they have wrinkles on. And they feel ashamed. They try to hide themselves. They try to avoid the angel and just get out of there as quickly as possible. So that creates a contrast between the figures on the left who haven't committed the sin yet and the ones that are sinful on the right. There's a stark contrast between those two. We can also compare the landscape. What is the difference between the left landscape and the right landscape?
The left one is a little bit darker, I guess. It's like a kind of more grey in the blue than on the right hand side. It's brighter blue.
How about the vegetation? The plants?
There are no plants on the right hand side. But on the
nothing.
left
There's nothing on the right.
Empty.
And how about on the left?
There are rocks. There are some. I can see there's a tree stump there. And you can have the leaves from the tree as well. So there's a bit more life.
There are some leaves at least. The ground is more of a darker green. It creates a more sense of more fresh
grass.
Vegetables, fresh grass, and there are some rocks. There are some details that tells you that this is Garden of Eden. This is a better looking landscape.
But normally the Garden of Eden is very verdant, isn't it? It's very green and very...
It should be filled with animals and filled with fruit and flowers. It's very simple. And we will also get to that. That's another clue that we need to talk about. Why the painter simplifies the landscape so much. But on the right, we see its complete isolation. There's nothing almost. Even the grass has changed color and it has become almost yellow. So it looks like a desert almost. So that's also in connection with before sin and after sin
The expulsion,
effects.
yeah.
Yes, with the expulsion. Now is the most exciting time of this video. Daniel is guessing which period, which movement this painting comes from.
Oh my god, the stress.
All the stress.
I think it's Renaissance.
Okay, why do you think it's Renaissance? That's the question I really love.
I think the figures are quite individual. There's a composition. There's also the same figures in the same image. That kind of storyboard feeling I know is common in Renaissance.
Yes.
You see like a progression of the story.
First thing, the story is shown in two different stages.
Yeah.
That is something we see more in medieval art, even before Renaissance, which is sometimes repeated in Renaissance too.
Okay.
How do the figures look? Do they look idealized? Do they look very realistic?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess
Like Baroque realistic?
No, I don't think they look Baroque realistic. But the ones on the left are kind of idealized because they're in utopia. But the ones on the right could look more realistic in terms of their...
Because they look a little bit
They're not
uglier.
as beautiful, yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
but still their bodies are idealized, their poses are idealized, especially on the left. It's easier to see all these idealized poses. It's a little bit harder on the right maybe, but they still are posing.
It feels like an old painting, though, older than like the Baroque ones, though. So I'm going to stick with Renaissance. So you're going to tell me I'm wrong.
That's a good one. That's a Renaissance painting. That's actually a high Renaissance painting. When Renaissance was at its highest form, that's why we call it the high Renaissance period. That's a very famous one. That's a Michelangelo.
Oh, okay. I've heard of him.
Yes, I believe you did.
He's a famous guy.
So that is a Michelangelo, and when we go back to what we have found out about the painting, we question this thing, remember, that he didn't stick to the biblical facts.
Yeah, there were changes.
He made Eve to take the apple from the snake, that was okay, but he also made Adam to reach the tree and get the apple for himself, get the fruit, we should say, himself. Why does he do that? Is Michelangelo does not have any knowledge about Bible? Didn't he read at all?
I want to say that he's a progressive, and he's saying that it was man's fault as well, not just women's fault.
Oh, maybe he wants to say that.
Like 16th century progressive.
We don't know. He might have his own interpretation of Bible, and he wants to show it in that way. But I personally would like to connect it with something more visual.
Okay.
Look at the figures. And when you look at them, why does he design them like this? Or when he designs them like this, when he designs Adam reaching out for the apple, he twists his body in a way that he just stabilizes his feet on the ground, but he turns his torso completely to the other end and his head. So he shows his beautiful broad back to us, all the muscles on the shoulder, on the arm. So that is a very interesting look.
So it's kind of a pose study, maybe.
Yes, very idealized pose. And he wants to show us how much he knows about human anatomy, how he also knows about the back of people. Because if that was a very typical fall of man scene, Adam and Eve scene, we would generally see Adam standing by the side of Eve. Eve is receiving the apple, Adam is standing on the other end. But in this version, Michelangelo does something that the other painters have not done before. He twists Adam's body. The same he did with Eve as well. When you look at her legs face left, but her torso is again turning towards right, and her head is completely turned to the right. So that is almost what we call manneristic, these coiled serpentine bodies, we call them. They are poses. They are made to turn from left to right at the same time. So that creates a very dynamic look and shows the figure from different angles to us. So that's very progressive in this sense, very visually progressive, but maybe also he wanted to bring a more progressive approach to religion as he wanted. But we know that he is very religious, that he read the Bible many times. So he truly knows the story. He just wants to produce something different.
It's going to be he's trying to show his skill at the study of the body.
Yes, exactly. That's how I feel, because we know that the Renaissance painters, especially the high Renaissance painters like Michelangelo or Raffaello or Leonardo da Vinci, they have done a lot of anatomical studies, they have worked on corpses, and they have discovered how the skeleton, how muscles they opened up corpses and they have done a lot of studies, figure studies of muscles. So they truly, especially Michelangelo, wants to show them. And along with that comes another fact that when you look at Eve, she looks very muscular and manly, doesn't she?
Yeah, quite.
Why do you think it's that?
I don't know. Maybe they do a lot of running around in the garden.
A lot of sports.
Yeah.
That might be the thing. Or we can say that he prefers women more muscular. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are a lot of theories about this as well, that Michelangelo is actually gay, and this is connected to his being gay, and he even paints women very muscular as well. That is connected to his sexual orientation. But also, I believe what Michelangelo does is he likes to exaggerate the muscular look of the figures. He does that with men as well. The muscles we see are a little bit too abundant and a little bit too much grown, too big. So he does that for men as well. So that is kind of his style as well. So he wants to show the muscles in a very prominent way, even in women.
The outsides of the image are a little bit odd. There's a pillar or something across the top and the bottom. So is this part of maybe a series of pictures?
Yes, exactly. That is a part of a series of paintings, and this one is actually located in the Sistine Chapel in Vatican. Yeah. This is the very, very famous, one of the pieces of the very famous Sistine Chapel ceiling
in the ceiling,
Vatican.
right? Okay.
Yes, that's in the ceiling, and this is a fresco. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it, you might see that the paint doesn't look like the other materials that you might have seen, because it's not oil painting.
Yeah, I noticed on the top right here, and the sky looks a little bit like it's kind of drawn by a child.
Yeah, it looks like that because this is actually painted on fresh white plaster on the ceiling, and then when it's applied, everything, the paint is put on the white plaster before it dries. Okay. That's why it looks a little bit different, because you may see the color tones, color shades changing, and some remarks, some things that during the application of the paint there are some differences, and you can see them very clearly. If it dries in different times, you can see cracks, you can see patches. Yeah. That's how fresco is.
Okay. I noticed that on the frames as well, there are sort of parts of other images coming through. There's a hand around what is that?
Yeah, it's like a piece of fruit, it's a piece of like a garland, because this is located on the ceiling with 9 different scenes from Old Testament following each other, and this is the 6th scene in the ceiling. And the 4th scene is the very famous one, Adam and God touching fingers. It starts with the creation of world, and then goes on to creation of Adam, creation of Eve, the original sin, and then some other stories from the Old Testament. Okay. So that's why in between those scenes, the painter creates those Roman Greek columns and some surfaces in between, and places a lot of naked figures in between. So the pieces you see here, a piece of an arm, a piece of a hand, a piece of some garland or some fruit basket, something, all of these are actually the middle figures in between those paintings, because he wanted to decorate the ceiling. He didn't want to just place one painting next to each other. Yeah. So he wanted to fill it with decoration.
So there's a kind of a border between them?
Yes, that's the border. So that's not truly a frame.
Right.
Because it's a fresco on the ceiling as well. This painting today is a part of the Vatican Museums. It's in the Sistine Chapel, which is a part of the Vatican Museums. And Sistine Chapel today is an active chapel. It's actively used for all the cardinals and upper level clergy of Christianity to assembly and choose the next pope, for example. They use it for certain occasions.
Important.
Yes, very important. The chapel was actually done by Pope Sixtus IV. That's why it's called he ordered the chapel to be made. So that's why we call it the Sistine Chapel, because it's ordered by Pope Sixtus IV. Right. The name comes from him.
Okay, and he asked for this for it to be covered by Michelangelo as well, I guess.
No, actually that's not the thing. When it was first done, it was made to look like open sky. It was painted in blue with some stars sprinkled on the ceiling. It looked like this for many years. But in the 16th century, Pope Julius II, another pope, ordered Michelangelo to paint the ceiling with something else, with stories.
Okay.
So, and it's very interesting that Michelangelo first didn't want to paint the ceiling because he was working for another project for Pope Julius II. He was working on creating his tomb.
Uh-huh.
And Michelangelo used to be more of a sculptor. He didn't have much painting experience. He was a very well-known sculptor, and he was choosing marbles from Carrara for the tomb of Julius II. He was creating the design, drawing the sculptures that is going to be included in his tomb. Mm-hmm. And then Pope Julius II calls him back to Rome, back to Vatican, to create this painting. He resists for a while. Eventually, eventually people tell Michelangelo that if you don't do what the Pope wants you to do, he will have you killed. Mm-hmm. So he had to give up. So he was really, can you imagine, he was really reluctant in the beginning to do that.
If you had the choice between sculpting or painting a ceiling,
that's a tough job.
Yeah, painting upside down, is not an easy thing to do.
It's not easy. He was standing up on a scaffolding, painting this. Everybody believes that he did it all by himself for 4 years, but actually he had a workshop working with him, so he wasn't alone, but he designed it himself. Mm-hmm. But execution was with a team. And it became a huge success for him later on. Can you imagine you just do something not willingly in the beginning and it turns out to be a masterpiece?
It's like books and publishing houses now. Sometimes we'll take Harry Potter, okay, we'll publish that, and then it becomes a success. Yeah.
Miracle, yeah.
So you said this was painted in the 16th century by Michelangelo?
Yes, at the very beginning of 16th century. It started in 1508 and it was finished by 1512. It took 4 years to paint the whole ceiling, so that's a part of it.
It took him so long because it's so huge, I guess.
Yes.
How big is this one?
It's huge. It's huge work. The chapel ceiling itself is 40 meters by 14 meters, so it's a very big ceiling. And this one, particularly this painting, is 2.8 by 5.7. It's still quite big. When you go to the Sistine Chapel and stay underneath the ceiling, it is a very big one, and it takes a lot of time to observe what there is on the ceiling. It's filled with paintings all over. That's all for today on Original Sin and Expulsion from Heaven by Michelangelo. Thank you very much for watching us.
Stick around for more reasons not to eat fruit.
And stay tuned for Art Talks for Beginners. Thank you.
Thanks.